My husband looked at me, his eyes full of fear as he whispered, "She's not my stepmother, she's blackmailing me." My heart froze in my chest. Then I saw her face, a cold, hard smile spreading across it. She held a picture of a dead man in her hand and said, "Now tell your wife everything or you lose it all." Listen to the entire story carefully. At the end of the video, share your opinion in the comments on how you would handle such a situation. And now let's get back to my story. I never told anyone this story before, not a single soul. It felt like a dark secret, heavy on my heart, buried for years. I thought if I didn't speak it, it might just disappear. But some things don't disappear. They just fester, waiting for the right moment to surface. It all started about 3 years ago. My life was simple then. I was a hardworking woman, proud of my small sewing business. I made custom clothes, mending old ones, always trying to bring a little joy with my stitches. I loved my husband, David, very much. We had been married for 5 years and for the most part we were happy. He worked in finance, a good job, or so I thought. We lived in a cozy 2-bedroom house, nothing fancy, but it was ours. We had plans, dreams of maybe having 2 children, of upgrading to a bigger home one day. Our biggest problem then was money, like many young couples. We weren't struggling to eat, but saving was hard, and sometimes a bill would come that would make us both sigh deeply. David was always kind to me in the beginning. He was gentle, attentive, and he made me laugh. I remember thinking how lucky I was to find such a good man. He had a sad past, though. His mother had died when he was young, and his father remarried quickly to a woman named Serena. David always told me he never really liked Serena, that she was cold and distant. His father passed away 10 years ago, and David said he hadn't spoken to Serena much since then. He just saw her at the funeral, a brief, awkward meeting. I felt sorry for him, having such a difficult family history. I wanted to be his comfort, his safe place. One evening, about 3 years ago, David came home looking very stressed. He didn't eat his dinner. He just pushed the food around on his plate. I asked him what was wrong, my heart feeling a little scared. Finally looked up at me, his eyes red. He said, "Honey, I have some bad news. My job, the company is having problems. They're cutting salaries for everyone. Mine is cut by 30%. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. 30%, that was a huge amount for us. We were barely making ends meet before. How would we manage? I asked him what we could do. Sell the house, get a second job. He shook his head slowly. No, there's something else. I spoke to Serena today. I was surprised. He hadn't mentioned her in ages. He explained that Serena, his stepmother, was also in a bad situation. Her husband, David's father, had left her with some debts, and she was about to lose her house. She was alone, had no children of her own, and no other family. David looked so sad as he spoke. He said she called him, desperate, asking for help. He told me he felt like he had to help her. He said, "I know you don't know her, but she's family in a way." I told her she could come live with us for a few months, just until she gets back on her feet. She said she could contribute a little money, which would help us too with my salary cut. My mind raced. Live with us, a stranger, in our small 2-bedroom house. I wanted to say no, to scream no. But then I looked at David's face, so full of worry and what looked like guilt. He looked so desperate. And the thought of a little extra money, even a small amount, did sound tempting with our new financial troubles. I loved David and I wanted to support him. I tried to be a good wife. I took a deep breath. "Are you sure, David? It's a big change." He nodded quickly. "Yes, honey, just for a few months, please. It's the only way I can see us getting through this without losing everything." I saw the desperation in his eyes, and I couldn't say no to him. I was a kind person, maybe too kind sometimes. I wanted to help him carry his burdens, so I agreed. I told myself it would only be for a short time. What harm could it do? This was my first big mistake. I should have listened to the small, cold voice inside me that told me something was very wrong. A week later, Serena arrived. She was a tall woman, slender, with sharp features and piercing green eyes. She wore very expensive clothes, which surprised me, given her supposed financial troubles. She didn't look like someone who was about to lose her home. When she walked in, she didn't smile warmly. She barely looked at me, just gave a quick nod. "You must be David's wife," she said, her voice flat. "I'm Serena." Her eyes scanned our living room, a faint look of disapproval on her face. It felt less like a grateful guest arriving and more like a queen inspecting a new territory. I felt a chill run down my spine. My instincts screamed, but I tried to be polite. "Welcome, Serena. Make yourself at home." What a joke that turned out to be. From the moment Serena moved in, our lives changed completely. My cozy home, once a sanctuary, became a battleground, and I was slowly, silently losing the war. At first, it was small things. She took over the guest room, demanding that I arrange it properly for her. She didn't like the curtains or the bedspread. She made me go out and buy new ones, even though money was tight. She said, "It's the least you can do. David's father always spoiled me. I'm used to nice things." I felt angry, but David just mumbled, "Please, honey, just do it. Let's not make waves." So I spent money we didn't have, trying to make her comfortable. Then she started criticizing everything I did. My cooking wasn't good enough. My house wasn't clean enough. My clothes were plain. One morning, I made a special breakfast, my famous pancakes, for David and Serena. She took one look, pushed her plate away, and said, "Is this all you can make? My housekeeper used to prepare fresh fruit, smoked salmon, pastries. David, you really should eat better." David just looked at his plate, embarrassed. I felt my face burn with shame and anger. I was a kind person, I worked hard, and this woman was treating me like I was nothing. But the worst part was how she acted with David. She would constantly touch his arm, his back, when she talked to him. She would laugh at his jokes in a way that felt too intimate. She would bring him coffee in his study, sitting close to him, talking in low voices for long periods. If I walked into the room, they would stop talking suddenly, and Serena would give me a strange, cold stare. David would look uncomfortable, sometimes even scared. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find Serena standing very close to David, her hand on his chest. She was whispering something to him, and he looked terrified. As soon as I entered, she pulled her hand away, her smile sharp and fake. "Oh, David and I were just discussing old family memories, weren't we, David?" she said, her eyes daring him to say otherwise. David just nodded quickly, not meeting my gaze. My heart sank. It felt like she was trying to steal my husband right under my nose. I started to feel heartbroken and very scared. What was happening? I tried to talk to David about it. "David," I said one night after Serena had gone to her room, "what is going on with Serena? She's so difficult, and the way she acts with you, it makes me feel uncomfortable." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's nothing, honey. She's just an old woman, a bit lonely. She lost her husband, remember? She's just looking for comfort. Don't worry about it." He sounded tired, but also dismissive. He wouldn't look at me directly. I knew he was hiding something, but I couldn't get him to talk. He just kept saying, "We need her money right now, honey. We need to be nice to her, just for a few more months." A few months turned into 6 months, then 9 months. Serena showed no signs of leaving. In fact, she seemed to be settling in, buying new furniture for her room, demanding we redecorate the living room to her taste. Our finances were still bad, despite her contribution, which was always less than she promised, or late. David grew more distant, more quiet. He stopped spending time with me. He stopped laughing. His eyes always held a look of deep worry, sometimes even fear. He looked like a prisoner in his own home. My birthday came around. It was Oct 12. David had always made a big deal of my birthday. He would get me flowers, take me to my favorite restaurant, spend the whole day making me feel special. This year I woke up and he was already gone to work. There was no card, no happy birthday. I felt a pang of sadness, but I told myself he was stressed, he would remember later. I went about my day, hoping for a surprise in the evening. When he came home, Serena was already there, sitting on the sofa, watching TV. David walked past me without a word, went into the kitchen and started making himself a sandwich. I stood there waiting. He never said anything. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "David," I said, my voice shaking a little. "Do you know what day it is?" He looked up, confused. "It's Tuesday, I think." Why? My heart shattered into a million pieces. He had forgotten. My own husband, my best friend, had forgotten my birthday. Serena looked up from the TV, a small smirk on her face. "Oh, is it your birthday, dear? How quaint." She went back to watching TV. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I ran into our bedroom, slammed the door, and cried silently into my pillow. I never told anyone this. The pain was too deep. David came in later, looking apologetic. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I've been so stressed with work. With Serena, it just completely slipped my mind. Please forgive me." I wanted to believe him, but something felt fundamentally broken. He hugged me, but it felt hollow. He wasn't himself. He was scared of something or someone, and that someone was Serena. The love triangle perception grew stronger, not just for me but for our neighbors. I started noticing strange looks, hushed whispers when I went to the grocery store. One day, my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, who was usually very friendly, just gave me a pitying look and hurried away when I tried to say hello. It felt like everyone thought David was having an affair with his stepmother, and I was just a sad, ignored wife. The thought made me sick. I didn't want to believe it. David loved me, didn't he? But then there were the nights I would wake up and David wasn't beside me. I would hear faint whispers from the living room, sometimes until 3:00 a.m. or 4:00 a.m. One night, I got up to get a glass of water. As I walked past the living room, I saw them. Serena was sitting on the sofa, her back to me. David was on his knees in front of her, his head bowed. He looked like he was pleading, his shoulders shaking. Serena was stroking his hair, speaking in a low, almost hypnotic voice. I couldn't hear the words, but the sight chilled me to the bone. It wasn't a love affair, it looked like control. It looked like something much, much darker. I quickly went back to bed, my heart pounding. I was scared to confront them, scared of what I might find out. I felt trapped in my own home, a prisoner in my own marriage. David's behavior became more and more erratic. He would snap at me for no reason, then apologize profusely. He would spend hours locked in his study with Serena. Our bank account was always low. I asked him once, "David, I thought Serena was giving us money. Our account is empty." He just stared at me, his eyes wide with panic. It's for her investments, honey. She's trying to make more money for us both. Just trust me." I didn't trust him. I didn't trust Serena. I didn't trust anything anymore. One particularly awful day, I found a pile of David's old financial statements in the trash. I shouldn't have looked, but my curiosity and my fear got the better of me. They were from 5 years ago, before we were married. I saw a huge sum of money, $50,000, transferred out of his account to an unknown company. Below it, a note from the bank. "Investigation pending, suspicious activity." I quickly put them back. What was this? David had never mentioned any financial trouble from before we met. My mind started putting pieces together. The salary cut, Serena's arrival, David's fear, the mysterious money issues. It all felt connected, but I couldn't see the full picture. The breaking point came a few weeks later. I was coming home from my sewing workshop early, feeling unwell. As I approached our front door, I heard loud voices coming from inside. It was Serena, her voice sharp and cold, and David, his voice filled with terror. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, too afraid to open it. I could hear David pleading. "Please, Serena, I told you everything. I paid you everything I have. I can't get any more." David's voice was hoarse. Then Serena's voice, slow and venomous. "Oh, David, you think it's over. That little accident 5 years ago. The one that ruined a family. The one that landed you in a heap of trouble with the law. I have the proof, remember. I have the confession you wrote. A little chat with the police and your perfect life, your perfect wife, gone. And those files I saw from your company, those irregularities in your accounts from 3 years ago. Yes, I know about those too. My dear, you're not going anywhere." My blood ran cold. An accident, the law, confession, files from his company. It wasn't just about money. It was about something terrible. I realized this wasn't a love triangle. It's a hostage situation. My husband was being blackmailed and I was just caught in the middle. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of pure terror and fierce anger. I had to know the truth. I pushed the door open, my hands shaking. Both David and Serena spun around. David's face was white, his eyes wide with horror as he saw me. Serena just smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. She didn't look surprised at all. She looked like she had been waiting for me. She was holding something in her hand. It was a photograph. A man's face, bruised and lifeless. My stomach churned. "What is going on here?" I demanded, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake inside me. Serena chuckled, a dry, evil sound. "Oh, she's here, perfect timing. David, dear, why don't you tell your lovely wife everything, or should I?" She waved the photograph. "You know, this picture would look very good on the front page of the local newspaper, or maybe on the police desk, with your signed confession letter. And all those delicious financial irregularities from your company." David looked from Serena to me, his eyes full of despair. He looked like a cornered animal. "Honey, I can explain," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "Explain what, David? That you've been lying to me this whole time, that this woman isn't your stepmother but someone who's blackmailing you." I pointed at Serena, my finger trembling. "Who is she? What did you do?" Serena stepped forward, her eyes glinting. Let me enlighten you, dear. David here, he had a little secret before he met you, a dark one. 5 years ago, he was in a car accident. He was driving drunk. He hit someone, killed him, a young man barely 20 years old. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Drunk driving, a death, my David, no, it couldn't be true. He covered it up with the help of some dirty money and a corrupt official. But I knew, I saw everything, I have the proof. And David, being the cowardly little mouse he is, has been paying me ever since to keep his secret safe. Serena's words were like daggers, each one piercing my heart. David fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands. It's true, he sobbed. It's all true, I was young, stupid, I panicked, I paid people off. Serena found out, she found the proof, she's been draining every cent from me. The salary cut, the financial issues, it was all part of her taking my money. She even threatened to go to my company with those old files if I didn't let her move in, so she could control me even more closely. I stared at David, then at Serena. My husband, the man I loved, was a murderer, a man who had hidden a terrible crime from me, and he had allowed this woman to destroy our lives, my peace, my home, all to protect his secret. The love triangle was a cruel illusion. I was just collateral damage in Serena's cruel game. My world crumbled around me. And David's father? I asked Serena, my voice hollow. Was he really your husband? Serena laughed again. Oh, that old fool, no, of course not. I knew him from a club, I used to work there. I just found out David was his son and a very convenient way to get money from him. I'm a professional, dear, I find secrets, I exploit them, it's how I make my living, and David's crime was just perfect. I felt sick to my stomach. This woman was pure evil. And David. David had been a terrible liar, a criminal. My love, my trust, everything I believed in, shattered into tiny pieces. I looked at the picture in Serena's hand, the face of a dead man. I looked at my husband, weeping on the floor. I looked at Serena, her face twisted with malice and triumph. This was the moment everything broke. The fragile glass of my reality splintered into countless sharp fragments, scattering across the polished floorboards of my mind, each piece reflecting a distorted image of what I thought my life was. A cold, hard knot of ice formed deep in my stomach, spreading its icy tendrils through my chest, constricting my breath until each gasp felt like drawing daggers into my lungs. The beautiful room, once a sanctuary filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a sterile, brightly lit interrogation chamber, every detail too sharp, too defined, too threatening. The vibrant floral pattern on the armchair blurred into a chaotic mess of colors, assaulting my already overwhelmed senses. The gentle tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hallway, usually a comforting rhythm, transformed into an insistent, metallic hammering inside my skull, each second echoing the finality of my ruined world. The air, thick moments ago with the sweet scent of Serena's expensive perfume and the lingering aroma of the fancy coffee David had made, suddenly turned stale and heavy, pressing down on me, making it hard to draw a full breath. The silence that followed Serena's cruel revelation was not an absence of sound, but a deafening roar within my ears, a tumultuous ocean of unspoken words and shattered dreams crashing against the shores of my consciousness. It was a silence so profound, so suffocating, that it seemed to absorb all other sounds, swallowing even the ragged, broken sobs that tore from David's throat as he huddled on the cold tiles. This wasn't the peaceful quiet of a snowy morning or the gentle hush before a sunrise. This was the terrifying, expansive silence of a vacuum, sucking all hope and warmth out of the room. It was a silence filled with the phantom whispers of lies, the ghostly echoes of betrayals, and the chilling premonition of a future utterly devoid of the comfort I had once known. Every creak of the old house, every distant chirp of a bird from outside the window, seemed amplified, piercing the unnatural stillness with brutal clarity, reminding me of a world that continued oblivious to the cataclysm unfolding right before my eyes. The very air vibrated with unspoken accusations, with the weight of deceit, and with the chilling satisfaction radiating from Serena's twisted smile. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape, its frantic beat the only sound louder than the roar of the silence itself. It felt like the world had paused, holding its breath, waiting for me to shatter into as many pieces as my life had just become. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the spot, feeling as heavy as lead. My arms hung limply at my sides, refusing to obey any command from my fractured mind. All I could do was stare, my eyes wide and unblinking, at the scene before me. David, my husband, the man I had loved for 7 years, was a crumpled heap on the floor, his face buried in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking with silent, wretched sobs. The sight, which should have stirred pity, instead ignited a searing flame of disgust within me. He wasn't crying for me, for the trust he had shattered, for the life he had destroyed. He was crying for himself, for being caught, for the comfortable lie being exposed. And Serena, oh Serena, she stood tall, a cruel queen surveying her conquered territory. Her red lipstick, so vibrant against her pale skin, seemed to stretch into an even wider, more triumphant smirk. Her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, glittered with an unholy joy. She still clutched the faded photograph, the image of a young man, David's brother, a man named Michael, who had died so long ago in a prison hospital as she had just claimed. She slowly, deliberately lowered her gaze from me to David, then back to me, savoring every excruciating second of my pain. What? What is she saying, David? My voice, when it finally emerged, was a raw, rasping whisper, barely audible. It felt alien, detached from me, as if someone else was speaking. David didn't lift his head. He just shook it slowly, mournfully. Me, please, I can explain. His words were muffled by his hands, choked by his own tears. But I heard the cowardice in them, the pathetic attempt to deflect, to beg for mercy he didn't deserve. Explain what? I pushed, a new surge of anger replacing the initial shock. Explain that you married me while carrying the guilt of your brother's death, a death caused by your own criminal actions. Explain that you have been lying to me every single day for 7 years. Explain that the man I thought I loved is nothing but a shell, a carefully constructed illusion built on a foundation of deceit and blood. Each word was a lash, stinging him, stinging myself even more deeply. Serena chuckled, a low, venomous sound that sent shivers down my spine. Oh, David doesn't need to explain anything, me. I've already done it for him. The truth is all there, isn't it? Your perfect husband, your charming David, is a murderer, a thief, a liar, and a very, very good actor. She paused, her gaze fixed on my face, watching for any sign of a crack. He didn't just get caught up in something, me, he orchestrated it. He convinced Michael to join him, promising easy money, a way out of their small-town lives. He was the brains, the leader. Michael, bless his naive heart, just wanted to please his older brother. He trusted David. Her voice dripped with bitter irony as she spoke Michael's name. Shut up, Serena, David finally roared, lifting his head. His face was blotchy and tear-streaked, his eyes red and swollen. But beneath the raw emotion, I saw something else, a flicker of the manipulative man Serena described. You don't know what you're talking about. You twist everything. Serena simply arched an eyebrow, a picture of calm disdain. Oh, do I, David? Do I twist the police reports? Do I twist the testimonies of the other gang members who got lighter sentences for ratting you out? Do I twist the fact that you walked free, while Michael, your own brother, died behind bars for your mistakes? She took a step closer to him, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. He suffered, David. He suffered for 2 years in that terrible prison. And you built this beautiful life, this mansion, this perfect wife with the money you stole, the money that cost your brother his life. My head spun. Money they stole, this mansion, the beautiful house, the comfortable life David had provided, suddenly felt tainted, covered in grime. Was it all built on ill-gotten gains? The thought made me feel physically ill. What money? I asked, my voice barely a whisper again. What did you steal? Serena's smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. A lot of money, me. A very large sum. Several $1 million from an armored car heist. The bank never recovered it all. David was smart, he hid his share well. And he used it to build this empire, this illusion of respectability. She gestured around the luxurious living room with a dismissive wave of her hand. Do you honestly think a junior executive with his background could afford all this? The antiques, the expensive art, the vacations, the diamond necklace he bought you for your 35th birthday. My hand flew to my throat, instinctively touching the delicate chain that held the glittering diamonds David had given me just a few months ago. It suddenly felt heavy, cold, and utterly repulsive against my skin. It wasn't a symbol of love, it was a testament to his crimes, a blood diamond in every sense of the word. A wave of nausea washed over me, so potent it made my head spin. I had to grip the back of the sofa to steady myself, my knuckles turning white. The intricate patterns on the expensive Persian rug beneath my feet seemed to writhe and contort, mirroring the turmoil in my soul. Each breath felt shallow and insufficient, as if the very air had become too thin to sustain life. David finally pushed himself up from the floor, staggering slightly as he faced me, his hands outstretched in a desperate plea. "Me, it's not like that. Serena is exaggerating. She's bitter, she's always been bitter. She hates me because Michael chose me over her, because I was the older brother, the one he looked up to." His voice was ragged, cracking with emotion, but I could hear the subtle shift, the beginning of the gaslighting. He was trying to turn me against her to discredit her words, but Serena wasn't having it. "Oh please, David, don't insult her intelligence any further. You know very well why I'm here. Michael was my fiancé, we were going to get married. We had plans. You stole his life, David. You stole our future, and you have the audacity to live this lavish lie, while I visited his grave every single week for 7 years. Her voice was now thick with raw, unvarnished pain, a pain so profound it cut through the malice, making me wonder if perhaps she was not just evil, but also deeply broken. Fiancé. I looked from David to Serena, my brain struggling to process this new layer of complexity. He was your fiancé. You never told me David had a brother, let alone that his brother was engaged. David flinched, pulling back his hands. It was a painful time, a long time ago. I didn't want to bring up old wounds. I wanted to protect you from my past. He sounded so sincere, so regretful, the master manipulator at work, attempting to weave a new narrative of protection and love. Protect me, my voice rose, a sharp, disbelieving laugh bubbling up from my chest. It was a harsh, ugly sound. You protected me by lying about every single fundamental aspect of your life. By letting me live in a house bought with stolen money. By letting me marry a man who sent his own brother to his death. The betrayal felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, threatening to crush my ribcage. The room, which had seemed so grand and full of beautiful things just moments ago, now felt small and stifling, the walls closing in. The light from the large windows, usually so welcoming, now seemed harsh and unforgiving, highlighting every speck of dust dancing in the air, every flaw in the meticulously curated decor. Serena stepped forward, her voice surprisingly gentle, though her eyes still held that dangerous glint. He didn't just lie me, he actively hid it. He made sure Michael's death certificate was sealed. He ensured no information about the case ever leaked. He changed his last name, didn't he, before he met you? He became David Miller to bury David Thompson. He even moved thousands of miles away, didn't he? From our small town in Kentucky, where everyone knew the story, to this big city where he could reinvent himself. I gasped, the air catching in my throat. David Miller. That was the name I knew. The name on our marriage certificate, on our joint bank accounts, on every official document. Was his real name David Thompson? Had I truly married a ghost, a phantom created from lies? The very foundations of my identity, tied to his, began to crumble. My hands began to tremble, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead despite the warmth of the room. The elegant silver-framed photographs on the mantelpiece, depicting happy moments from our 7 years together, our wedding day, a trip to Italy, a Christmas morning with David's beaming smile now seemed to mock me, each image a cruel reminder of the elaborate charade. David took a step towards Serena, his face twisted with fury. You had no right to come here, Serena, no right to ruin everything. His voice was low, menacing, a side of him I had never seen before. The mask of the loving, gentle husband had finally slipped, revealing the ugliness beneath. Ruin everything, Serena scoffed, her eyes blazing. You ruined my everything, David. You ruined Michael's everything. This is just a small taste of what you deserve. She turned back to me, her expression softening, though the hardness remained in her eyes. He was going to leave Michael to rot me. He never even visited him in prison. Not once. He pretended Michael never existed, and he would have done the same to you eventually. Once he tired of you, once his money ran out, or once he found someone else, he would have discarded you just as easily. He's a monster, he always has been. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. He would have discarded you. The thought, chilling in its stark simplicity, resonated with a deeper fear I had unknowingly harbored. David, for all his charm, had always been a little too smooth, a little too perfect. A nagging intuition, a tiny voice in the back of my mind that I had consistently suppressed, now screamed triumphantly. The carefully constructed image of my devoted husband, the man who brought me flowers every Friday and remembered my favorite type of tea, shattered completely, leaving behind a hollow, empty shell. The small acts of kindness once cherished now felt like calculated moves in a long, elaborate game designed to keep me docile and oblivious. My chest tightened further, making it feel impossible to draw a full breath. A searing pain blossomed behind my eyes, signaling the onset of a blinding headache. I looked at David, truly looked at him, stripped bare of all pretenses by Serena's brutal honesty. His eyes, usually warm and full of affection for me, were now pools of fear and desperation, darting between Serena and me, searching for an escape route. His lower lip trembled, and his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. He was no longer the strong, reliable man I had married. He was a terrified child, caught red-handed. And in that moment, seeing him so vulnerable, so exposed, I felt absolutely nothing for him but a profound, aching emptiness. All the love, all the tenderness, all the shared dreams we had built over 7 beautiful years evaporated like mist in the scorching sun. "Get out," I heard myself say, the words surprisingly firm, unwavering. David's head snapped up. "Me, no, please, don't listen to her. She's lying, she's crazy." His voice was a pathetic whine, full of self-pity. I said, "Get out, David." My voice was louder now, cutting through his pleas. "Get out of my sight, get out of this house, now." My eyes were fixed on him, cold and unyielding. The pain was still there, a dull throb behind my temples, but a new, fierce resolve was hardening around my shattered heart. I would not let him manipulate me any longer. I would not be another one of his victims. He stared at me, disbelief warring with panic in his eyes. He must have seen something in my expression, some unyielding determination that told him his usual charm and desperate pleas wouldn't work this time. He glanced at Serena, who stood with her arms crossed, a quiet, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She had done what she came to do. She had broken him, and in doing so had broken me too. Slowly, reluctantly, David backed away. His eyes never left mine, searching, pleading, but I gave him nothing. He stumbled over the expensive antique rug, nearly falling, a stark contrast to his usual graceful demeanor. He turned and walked towards the front door, his movements stiff and jerky. He fumbled with the doorknob for a moment, his hands still trembling, before finally pulling it open. A gust of fresh autumn air, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke, swept into the house, momentarily clearing the suffocating atmosphere. He looked back at me one last time, his face a mask of despair, but I simply stared through him. He then stepped out, closing the door softly behind him, the gentle click of the latch echoing loudly in the sudden, eerie quiet. The moment he was gone, a different kind of silence descended. It wasn't the roaring, suffocating silence from before, but a hollow, empty quiet, filled with the vast absence he had left behind. My knees suddenly buckled, and I sank onto the nearest armchair, my hands still gripping its sides, my entire body trembling uncontrollably. A whimper escaped my lips, and then another until I was sobbing uncontrollably, hot tears streaming down my face, washing away the shock and disbelief, leaving behind only raw, agonizing pain. It was a grief so profound, so absolute, that it felt like a physical tearing within my very being. Serena watched me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she slowly walked towards me and gently laid the photograph of Michael on the small antique side table beside my chair. "I'm so sorry, me," she said, her voice surprisingly soft, devoid of its previous venom. "I never wanted to hurt you, but you deserve to know. Michael deserved justice." I looked up at her through my tear-filled eyes. Her face, etched with lines of past suffering, now seemed weary, the triumph momentarily faded. For the first time, I saw not just the vengeful woman but the grieving fiancé, the sister-in-law who had lost everything. The complexity of her emotions was overwhelming. "Why now?" I managed to choke out between sobs. "Why did you wait 7 years?" she sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound. "I didn't. I've been trying to find him for years. He disappeared after the trial. Changed his name, moved states. I hired private investigators. It took 5 years just to find out he was living here in the city. Then another 2 years to track him down, to confirm it was him, and to gather enough evidence to expose him without putting myself in danger. I needed concrete proof, not just my word against his. And I wanted to pick the right moment, the moment when it would hurt him the most. When he thought he was safe, untouchable. Her eyes hardened slightly as she spoke the last words. I needed him to feel even a fraction of the pain Michael felt. The logic of her revenge was chilling, but I could understand it. The depth of her pain must have been immense to fuel such a long, meticulous pursuit of vengeance. And I was simply collateral damage, an unfortunate casualty in a war I didn't even know existed until 20 minutes ago. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice thin and lost. The question wasn't directed at Serena, but at the empty air, at the universe, at myself. My entire future, meticulously planned and dreamed, had vanished in an instant. Serena knelt beside my chair, her gaze surprisingly steady and compassionate. "You survive me, you pick up the pieces, and you find justice for yourself, just like I did for Michael. David is a criminal. He has stolen from many people, not just the bank. He stole your trust, your peace of mind, your 7 years. Don't let him get away with it." She placed a hand gently on my arm. Her touch, though unexpected, was not unwelcome. It was a strange comfort from an even stranger ally. "What evidence do you have?" I asked, looking at the faded photograph of Michael, then back at her. "Everything," she said simply. "Police reports, court documents, prison records, eyewitness accounts from other members of the crew who identified David as the leader. Bank statements that show large, unexplained deposits into offshore accounts right after the heist, accounts he slowly bled dry over the years to fund this lifestyle. I have it all. I've been meticulously building this case for 7 years. I didn't just walk in here with a photo and a story, me. I have a binder full of proof. It's in my car. I can get it for you if you want to see it." A binder full of proof. The sheer scale of David's deception and Serena's relentless pursuit was staggering. My mind reeled. The thought of looking through that binder, of seeing the cold, hard facts of David's crimes laid bare, filled me with a mixture of dread and a desperate need for absolute certainty. I had to know, I had to see it all. "Yes," I whispered, my voice still hoarse from crying. "Yes, please, I need to see it." Serena nodded. She rose gracefully and walked towards the front door. "I'll be right back." The moment she was gone, I was alone again, truly alone in the vast, silent house. The sobs subsided, replaced by a dull ache in my chest. My eyes scanned the familiar surroundings, the expensive artwork, the custom-made furniture, the glittering chandeliers, and each item, once a source of pride and comfort, now felt like a monument to a terrible lie. This wasn't my life. It was a carefully constructed facade. And I, me, the woman who believed in honesty and integrity, had unknowingly become an accessory to a criminal's deception. The shame, the humiliation, washed over me in a fresh wave. My face burned with it. My mind started to race, replaying snippets of my life with David, his vague answers about his past, his discomfort whenever I asked about his family, his insistence on keeping our finances somewhat separate, saying it was modern and healthy for a marriage, but always controlling the larger investments. The way he would sometimes disappear for a day or two for business trips that seemed to have no tangible outcome. The expensive gifts, always lavish, always designed to dazzle, perhaps to distract. Each memory, once benign, now twisted into something sinister, a piece of a puzzle I had been too blind, too trusting to put together. I had been so deeply disrespected, not just by David's criminal past, but by his absolute conviction that he could lie to me so completely, for so long, and get away with it. He had treated me as if I were a foolish, easily deceived woman, someone whose intelligence and intuition were so negligible that I wouldn't notice the gaping holes in his fabricated life story. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was an insult to my very being, to my capacity for judgment, to my worth as an individual. He had used me, used my genuine love and trust, as a shield, as a cover for his illicit past. The realization filled me with a cold, righteous fury that began to push aside the overwhelming grief. Serena returned, carrying a thick, black binder. Its weight seemed significant as she placed it on the coffee table in front of me. "Everything is in here," she said, her voice grave. "Take your time, read it all. And when you're ready, don't let him win. He thinks he's gotten away with it. He thinks he's untouchable. Prove him wrong." She didn't stay much longer after that. She offered a quick, somewhat awkward hug, a gesture that surprised both of us, then left, her final words hanging in the air. Call me if you need anything, anything at all. You have my number." And then I was truly alone, sitting in the opulent living room, with a thick black binder full of a stranger's crimes and my shattered life laid out before me. My hand trembled as I reached for the binder. The cover was plain, unassuming, but I knew it held the key to unlocking the full horror of David's deception. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I opened it. The first document was a police report from 8 years ago, detailing an armored car heist. The names jumped out at me: David Thompson, Michael Thompson, and 2 other names I didn't recognize. David Thompson. The name looked so wrong, so alien, yet it was undeniably him in the grainy mugshot attached to the report. His face, younger, harder, but undeniably David. My eyes blurred with tears again, but I blinked them away fiercely. I had to be strong. I had to read every word. The report detailed the meticulous planning, the stolen getaway vehicle, the precise timing. It described how 4 individuals, led by David Thompson, had executed a daring daylight robbery, making off with approximately $2.7 million in cash. The next page contained witness statements, descriptions of the suspects, and then the chilling part: an account of a shootout with security guards, resulting in 2 injuries to the guards and the death of one of the robbers, identified as Michael Thompson, who had sustained a fatal gunshot wound during the escape. My blood ran cold. Michael hadn't died in prison, he had died during the heist itself in the crossfire. Serena had twisted that detail, perhaps to amplify David's perceived guilt, or perhaps she simply referred to his death being caused by the overall event. Regardless, David had been directly involved in a violent, deadly crime. Not just a thief, but a participant in a violent confrontation. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I flipped through more pages. Indictments. Court transcripts. David had been arrested, along with the others, but his lawyer had somehow managed to secure a plea deal for him. He testified against the remaining living members of the crew, and in exchange, his sentence was significantly reduced. He served only 18 months in a minimum security facility, not the 10-20 years the others received. He had even been released under a new name, granted witness protection of a sort due to his cooperation. This was why he could disappear, reinvent himself. This was how David Miller was born. The injustice was staggering. Michael, his own brother, was dead, and David got off with a slap on the wrist, emerging with a new identity and millions in stolen cash. The binder also contained financial records, copies of bank statements from several offshore accounts, showing an initial deposit of over $700,000 right after the heist. These funds were then systematically transferred into various domestic accounts over the next few years, laundered through shell companies and complex financial maneuvers. That money, Serena had said, was what funded this opulent lifestyle. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. Every single luxurious item in this house, every vacation, every expensive meal, every piece of jewelry David had ever given me, was bought with blood money. Stolen money. That cost a man his life. The disrespect was immense. He not only lied to me, he implicated me. By living in this house, by benefiting from his wealth, I had unknowingly become entwined in his criminal enterprise. My name, my reputation, my entire future was now potentially at risk. The thought of what this could mean for me, for my own integrity, sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I was a respected elementary school teacher, a pillar of my community. What would happen if this came out? Would my career be ruined? Would I be investigated? The following days were a blur of grief, anger, and a desperate search for answers. I spent hours locked in the living room, poring over the documents in Serena's binder, each page a fresh wound. I couldn't eat. The sight of food made my stomach churn. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's manipulative face, Michael's faded photograph, and Serena's vengeful eyes. The once comforting silence of the house became oppressive, mocking. David called repeatedly. His number flashed on my phone screen like a siren, a constant reminder of the chaos he had unleashed. I ignored every single call. He sent endless text messages, desperate, pleading, full of apologies and promises to explain, to make things right. I deleted them unread. I simply couldn't bear to hear his voice, to read his lies again. The thought of his smooth, deceptive words made my skin crawl. He even tried to come back to the house on the 3rd day, knocking on the door with increasing urgency, his voice hoarse as he called my name. I hid in the back of the house, trembling, until he finally gave up and left. The disrespect of his persistence, his belief that he could charm or beg his way back into my life after such a monumental betrayal, was infuriating. I finally called my best friend, Sarah. Sarah, who had been my rock since we were 5 years old. She was a no-nonsense lawyer, sharp and fiercely loyal. Her calm, steady voice on the phone was a lifeline in the stormy sea of my emotions. I told her everything slowly, painfully, recounting Serena's visit, the binder, the horrific truth about David. Sarah listened patiently, her silence a reassuring presence on the other end of the line. When I finished, the silence was heavy for a moment before she finally spoke. "Me," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm so incredibly sorry. This is an unimaginable betrayal, but you did the right thing, you needed to know." She then shifted into her lawyer mode, her voice becoming crisper. "First things first, you need to get out of that house. Immediately, you cannot be associated with any of David's assets. We need to protect you legally and financially." "But where would I go?" I asked, feeling utterly lost. This house was my home, my sanctuary. Now it felt like a cage built of lies. "You can stay with me," Sarah offered instantly. "My guest room is always open. For as long as you need. We'll figure everything out, me, step by step. But for now, you need to prioritize your safety and your future." Her unwavering support was a balm to my raw soul. That evening, with Sarah's help, I packed a single suitcase. It felt surreal, as if I were a character in a movie, watching my own life unfold. I didn't take any of the expensive gifts David had given me. No jewelry, no designer clothes, nothing that had been bought with his tainted money. I took only my personal belongings, my clothes, my books, my worn photographs of my own family, things that represented my life, separate from him. The act of leaving, of walking out the front door of the house I had shared with David for 7 years, was perhaps the hardest thing I had ever done. Each step felt like walking away from a part of myself, a painful severing. The chill of the autumn night air felt stark against my face, a physical manifestation of the cold, harsh reality I was now facing. The next few weeks were a blur of emotional turmoil and practical decisions. Sarah was incredible. She helped me contact a divorce lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Ms. Evans. Ms. Evans immediately filed for an emergency protective order against David, based on the documented history of his violent criminal past, which prevented him from contacting me or approaching Sarah's home. This provided a small but significant measure of peace. The divorce proceedings began. It was ugly, as expected. David, infuriated that I had left and was now pursuing legal action, fought back with venom. His attempts to disrespect me continued, even through his legal team. His lawyer tried to paint me as a gold digger, claiming I was only interested in his wealth that was, in fact, illegally obtained. They argued that I was aware of his past, an outrageous lie. They even tried to claim that Serena was a deranged stalker and her binder was a fabrication. But Serena, true to her word, provided her meticulously collected evidence to my lawyer. The weight of the proof was undeniable. The police reports, the court transcripts, the financial records, all authenticated by experts, painted a damning picture of David's life. The sheer audacity of David's claims, his continued gaslighting even through his legal representatives, was a fresh wave of disrespect. He believed that even after all the truth had come out, he could still twist the narrative, still undermine my credibility, still avoid accountability. It made my blood boil. But Sarah and Ms. Evans were formidable. They systematically dismantled his defenses, presenting the overwhelming evidence of his criminal history and his deliberate deception. The community, too, began to react. Whispers started spreading, inevitably. Some people, those who had always been a little suspicious of David's too-good-to-be-true charm and sudden wealth, began to talk. Others, those who had adored David, expressed shock and disbelief, sometimes even pity for him. A few, sadly, even blamed me, suggesting I should have known or that I was too naive. These veiled accusations, often delivered through thinly disguised gossip or uncomfortable glances, were a further form of disrespect, undermining my suffering and blaming the victim. One day I received a package at Sarah's house, forwarded from my old address. Inside was a single, withered rose, its petals dried and crumbling, along with a note scrawled in David's familiar handwriting. "You'll regret this, me." You'll never find anyone who loves you like I did. You belong with me, this isn't over. It was a chilling reminder of his possessiveness, his refusal to accept the end, a continuation of his disrespectful attempts to control and intimidate me, even from afar. I immediately handed it to Ms. Evans, who assured me it further strengthened the case for the protective order. Slowly, agonizingly, I started to rebuild. I returned to my teaching job after taking a short leave of absence. My colleagues and the parents of my students were incredibly supportive, creating a safe, understanding environment for me. It was hard, facing the world, feeling exposed and vulnerable. But being back in the classroom, surrounded by the innocent energy of 5-year-olds, gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. Their laughter, their curious questions, their pure joy in learning, slowly began to mend the raw edges of my heart. Serena also kept in touch. Our relationship was complex, forged in the fires of shared trauma and mutual enmity towards David. She wasn't a friend in the traditional sense, but an unexpected ally. She helped me navigate the legal labyrinth, offering advice and insights into David's manipulative tactics. She even shared her own painful journey of healing, reminding me that even after immense loss and betrayal, life could still be lived, and even found joy again. Her presence was a constant reminder of the depth of David's depravity, but also a beacon of resilience. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 8 months. David continued to fight, delaying, obfuscating, trying every trick in the book. He refused to acknowledge the stolen money, claiming it was legitimately earned through clever investments. His attempts to withhold information, to conceal assets, were a constant stream of disrespect, designed to exhaust me and prolong my suffering. But Ms. Evans and Sarah were relentless. They exposed every lie, every hidden account, every false statement. The court eventually sided with me, granting the divorce and ordering a significant portion of David's remaining assets to be seized and frozen. A portion was designated as compensatory damages for emotional distress, and the rest was to be investigated for its criminal origins. A legal battle ensued over the ownership of the house, which was still technically in David's name, purchased with the ill-gotten gains. The judge eventually ruled that the house and its contents would be put up for sale, with the proceeds going towards restitution for the original crime victims and a portion to me as part of the divorce settlement, after deducting legal fees. I didn't want the tainted money, but Ms. Evans insisted it was essential for my future, for rebuilding a life free from David's shadow. The day the divorce was finalized, 23 July 2024, was a bittersweet one. I felt a profound sense of relief, like a suffocating weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But it was also tinged with sadness, for the life that could have been, for the innocent woman I once was. David was stripped of his wealth, his reputation, and his freedom. The authorities, thanks to the evidence presented in the divorce case, reopened the armored car heist investigation. He was eventually arrested again, not just for the original crime, but for money laundering, perjury during the divorce proceedings, and obstruction of justice. The second trial was swifter, the evidence against him overwhelming. He was sentenced to a substantial prison term, 15 years, without the possibility of parole. As I watched the news report about his sentencing, sitting in Sarah's cozy living room, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, I felt a flicker of something akin to peace. It wasn't triumph, not exactly, more like a quiet resolution. He had finally faced the full consequences of his actions. He had finally paid for the disrespect, the lies, the betrayal, the lives he had destroyed. My own journey of healing was long and arduous. It was a daily battle to trust again, to believe in kindness, to open my heart. But with Sarah's unwavering support, with the quiet courage of Serena's resilience, and with the simple, pure joy of my students, I slowly began to piece myself back together. I found a small, charming apartment of my own, filled with simple, honest furniture that held no tainted memories. I learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the honest friendships, the beauty of a life built on truth, not on lies or stolen money. I rediscovered my own strength, my own voice, and my own unwavering spirit. David had shattered my world, but he hadn't broken me. And that, my dear friends, is the story of how I found my way back to myself after being lost in a labyrinth of deceit. It's a testament to the fact that even when everything seems to break, There's always a way to gather the pieces and build something new, something stronger, something more authentic. Thank you for listening to my fireside story tonight. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Aunt Me's Fireside Stories for more tales of resilience and hope. Resilience and hope. It was this very resilience that helped me through those long, quiet nights, when the silence itself seemed to hum with unspoken thoughts and the lingering echoes of words I wished I hadn't heard. After everyone had gone, the house would settle around me, a heavy, velvet blanket of quiet. The old grandfather clock in the hall would tick, each second a tiny, sharp whisper in the vast, still air, counting down moments I felt slipping away. Outside, the night sounds began: the soft rustle of leaves against the window pane, a distant owl's mournful hoot, the low, steady thrum of the crickets, a symphony of the world carrying on without me. Sometimes, a gentle breeze would sneak through a crack in the window frame, carrying the cool scent of pine and damp earth, and it would raise the tiny hairs on my arms, a shiver not of cold, but of a deep, profound loneliness. My own breathing sounded loud in my ears, a testament to being utterly, completely alone in the sprawling, familiar rooms that once bustled with laughter and argument. The old wooden floors, worn smooth by generations of footsteps, seemed to groan softly under the weight of the silence, holding onto memories like dust motes caught in a sunbeam. It was in these moments that the disrespect, the slights, and the unkind words truly sank their teeth into my heart, twisting and turning in the solitude until they felt too heavy to bear. I remember one particular evening, it must have been around 2 years ago, when the first subtle cracks started to show, not in the walls of my old house, but in the foundation of my family relationships. My son David and his wife Sarah had come over for what they called a family chat. We sat in the living room, the one with the worn velvet sofa and the fireplace that always smelled faintly of burnt wood, even when it wasn't lit. The air was thick, not with warmth but with an odd, strained politeness. Sarah, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and her expensive purse clutched in her lap, began by talking about my finances. Her voice was soft, almost a purr, but her words were like tiny, sharp needles. "Mother me," she started, her eyes scanning the room, lingering on the slightly faded wallpaper, "we're just concerned about your expenses. This old house, it must be a drain, mustn't it? The heating bills alone." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air, a sour note in the otherwise silent room. I felt my cheeks flush, a warm, uncomfortable heat spreading up my neck. I had lived in that house for over 50 years, raised 3 children within its sturdy walls. It was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a living, breathing part of my history. "The house is fine, dear," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "and I manage my money perfectly well." David, who usually had a gentle laugh and a kind smile, shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the antique rug. He didn't look at me, not once. His silence was louder than Sarah's words, a tacit agreement that stung more than any direct criticism. I could almost taste the metallic tang of disappointment in my mouth. It felt like they were dissecting my life, not out of care, but out of a judgment that made me feel small and incapable. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, like a cold, hard stone. The scent of the lemon polish I'd used that morning on the coffee table suddenly seemed sterile and unwelcoming. Then came the little dismissals, the constant undercutting of my experience. My daughter Emily, usually so loving, started doing it too, often without even realizing, or so I hoped. I remember another dinner, this one at her immaculate, modern home, all clean lines and glass. I was sharing a story about a particular struggle I'd faced when I was younger, raising a family during the difficult economic times of the 1970s. I was talking about how I managed to stretch every dollar, making clothes for the children and growing our own vegetables. And the joy of seeing the children eat those fresh tomatoes, warm from the sun, it was. I started, a smile touching my lips as the memory warmed me. But Emily interrupted, her voice a little too bright. "Oh, Mother, that's such a sweet story, but things are so different now. You can just pop to the grocery store, it's much more efficient." She waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a pesky fly, and then turned to her husband, Mark, to discuss the price of organic kale. My story, my experience, my very history was just sweet, a quaint relic of a bygone era, irrelevant to their fast-paced, modern lives. The delicious aroma of her roasting chickens suddenly seemed bland to me, and the clinking of cutlery on plates felt like a cacophony. My throat tightened, and I simply stopped speaking, the end of my sentence left hanging in the air, unspoken, unheard. It felt like being erased, piece by painful piece. The exclusion started small, too, a creeping chill that seeped into my world. There were times I would hear about family gatherings after they had happened, or receive an invitation that felt like an afterthought. One Sunday afternoon, I called David just to chat. He mentioned he'd just returned from a wonderful family picnic at the community park with all the grandchildren and Emily's family. My heart sank, a heavy, leaden weight. "Oh," I managed to say, trying to sound casual, "that sounds lovely. I didn't realize you were planning anything." There was a pause, a moment of awkward silence on the line, before he mumbled something about it being last minute and not wanting to bother me. Bother me to spend time with my own family. The sun was streaming through my kitchen window that afternoon, usually a source of comfort, but that day it felt cold and harsh, illuminating every speck of dust in the air, every shadow in my heart. I looked around my silent kitchen, the kettle still warm from my solitary cup of tea, and a profound sense of isolation washed over me. The smell of freshly cut grass, usually a pleasant scent from my own yard, now reminded me of the laughter I hadn't heard, the faces I hadn't seen. Then came the truly patronizing behavior, the way they started to treat me as if my mind was fading, my opinions irrelevant. I'd mention something from the news, a political event, or a new scientific discovery I'd read about, and they would nod, a slow, patient nod, the kind you give to a child or someone who isn't quite all there. David would often say, "Yes, mother, that's interesting," with a tone that clearly implied it was anything but. Sarah would explain simple concepts to me slowly and loudly as if I were hard of hearing or dull-witted. "You see, mother, me," she once explained, detailing how to use a new app on my phone despite me having used it for months. "This little icon here, it's for the internet browser. It's like a window to all the information in the world." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her eyes held a pity that burned hotter than any anger. I felt my skin prickle with indignation, but what could I say? To argue would only confirm their unspoken belief that I was indeed irrational or losing my faculties. The air in the room felt tight, pressing in on me, and I could feel a dull ache starting behind my eyes. The colors in the room seemed to dim, as if the vibrancy had been sucked out of everything by their condescending words. The worst, though, were the direct, cutting words, those moments when the veneer of politeness finally slipped. It happened during one of our rare full family gatherings for my 75th birthday. My grandchildren were running around, their joyful shouts echoing through the house, a sound I usually cherished. But David and Emily had pulled me aside, their faces serious. "Mother," David began, his voice low, "we need to talk about your will. Sarah and I, we feel it's important to make sure everything is handled properly, given everything." My heart leaped into my throat. "Given everything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Emily chimed in, her lips tight. "Yes, mother, we just want to ensure your assets are protected, and that certain choices you might make now don't impact what we've worked so hard for." It was Sarah who delivered the final, crushing blow. She stepped forward, her expensive perfume suddenly acrid in the air, her smile a thin, cruel line. "Honestly, mother, me," she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "sometimes you act as if you're not fully aware of the consequences of your decisions. It's almost as if you're trying to defy us." Defy them, my own children. My head swam, and the happy sounds of my grandchildren suddenly seemed far away, muffled by the ringing in my ears. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous, coating my tongue with the bitter taste of betrayal. It wasn't just about money, it was about my autonomy, my intelligence, my very right to exist as an independent person. Their faces, usually so familiar and dear, now seemed hard and judgmental, their eyes cold and unyielding. I felt a chill spread through my chest, a physical ache that burrowed deep into my bones. The cake, beautifully decorated with 75 candles, sat on the dining table, its sweet vanilla scent now completely lost to me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but I simply stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of their disapproval press down on me, crushing my spirit. It felt like a part of me, a vital, living part, had just been extinguished. The joyous sounds of my grandchildren playing outside now felt like a cruel mockery of the joy that had been sucked out of my own heart. I could only stare at them, my vision blurring slightly as the full implications of their words washed over me. It was not just a suggestion or a concern, it was an accusation, a dismissal of my entire being. My own children, the very ones I had nurtured and loved with every fiber of my being, were now stripping me of my dignity, piece by painful piece, right there in my own home, on my own birthday. The air itself seemed to crackle with their unspoken judgment, and I felt a profound sense of shame, not for myself but for them. It was a shame that burned hotter than any anger could. I remember excusing myself, mumbling something about needing to check on the cake, and retreated to the quiet sanctuary of my bedroom. The heavy oak door shut behind me with a soft thud, a sound that felt both like a prison closing and a shield raising. I stood there, leaning against the cool, smooth wood, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The room was dim, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun, casting the familiar space in muted shades of gray and shadow. I could hear the distant, happy din of the party continuing downstairs, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the lively chatter, all sounds that felt utterly foreign to me now, like echoes from a world I no longer belonged to. A wave of nausea washed over me, a physical manifestation of the emotional blow. My hands trembled slightly, and I noticed the fine lines etched into their surface, the age spots, the subtle tremor that was becoming more frequent. These hands, which had cooked countless meals, mended torn clothes, cradled sick children, and offered comfort to many, now felt weak and useless. I walked slowly to the vanity table, my gaze falling upon my reflection in the antique mirror. A woman with tired eyes stared back, lines of worry etched around her mouth, her once vibrant hair now a soft, cloudy white. Is this what they saw? An old woman, frail and foolish, incapable of making her own decisions. The bitter taste in my mouth returned, a constant reminder of their harsh words. I ran my fingers over the smooth, cool surface of the mahogany dresser, the same dresser my mother had given me on my wedding day. So many memories were tied to these objects, to this room, to this house. Each piece of furniture, each faded photograph on the wall whispered stories of a life lived fully, with joy and sorrow, triumphs and struggles. And yet in their eyes, it was all reduced to mere assets and potential defiance. The faint scent of lavender from the sachet tucked into my linen drawer wafted gently towards me, usually a comforting aroma, but now it felt like a fragile memory, barely clinging to existence. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the soft mattress sinking slightly beneath my weight. The silence in the room was palpable, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on me. It was a silence filled not with peace, but with the buzzing echoes of their accusations, each word a tiny, stinging insect trapped inside my skull. I could hear the faint murmur of their voices from downstairs, a low, indistinct hum that told me the party, my birthday party, was indeed continuing without me. And it was then, in that moment of profound isolation and hurt, that a decision began to form, a slow, steady resolve solidifying within me like cold concrete. I had always been resilient, a trait passed down from my own fierce mother, a woman who had weathered far worse storms than this. I had built this life, this home, this family with my own hands and heart, and I could not, allow them to diminish me, to erase my worth, to dictate my existence. No, not anymore. The tears did not come then, though my eyes burned with unshed grief. Instead, a quiet strength began to unfurl within me, a slow, steady warmth spreading from my core, pushing back against the coldness of their disregard. I looked out the window, past the drawn curtains, towards the ancient oak tree in my backyard. Its branches, gnarled and strong, had weathered countless seasons, standing firm against raging winds and bitter frosts. It was a silent testament to enduring. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I too could stand firm. My story wasn't over. My voice wasn't silenced. This wasn't the end, but rather a turning point. It was the moment I realized that their disrespect was not a reflection of my worth, but a reflection of their own fears and insecurities, and I would not let their shadows eclipse my light. The next morning, the house felt different. The silence, though still present, was no longer suffocating. It felt like a calm, open space, ready to be filled with new purpose. I walked through the rooms, touching the familiar surfaces, seeing them not as old or worn, but as imbued with history, with love, with the very essence of me. The grandfather clock continued its steady tick-tock, but now it felt like a reassuring heartbeat, marking time, yes, but also marking the unfolding of a new chapter. I decided then and there that I would face this challenge, not with anger, but with quiet determination. I would show them, not by shouting or arguing, but by living my life fully, authentically, and joyfully on my own terms. I would embrace my wisdom, my memories, and my independence. This, I knew, would be my greatest act of resilience, my truest testament to hope. It was a long journey, filled with many small, quiet battles, but I was ready for every single one. Thank you for listening to my fireside story tonight. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Nunny Stories for more tales of resilience and hope.